Everybody, my name is Corey. I'm going to walk you through how to fill out a NAFTA certificate. And if you're watching this video, chances are you might be rushed in order to fill out the NAFTA, in which case you can skip ahead to this URL. It is an interface to help you complete the NAFTA certificate. Otherwise, I encourage you to stick around as I'm going to explain some of the many nuances of the NAFTA agreement and how it is actually completed. So what you're looking at right here is the PDF of the NAFTA Certificate of Origin. This is how the majority of NAFTAs are filled out. It does not need to be an original signed copy that you deliver to your customer or to customs. It just has to be a copy that you've signed down here at the bottom and have filled out with all the correct data. Now this top part here is very easy. It's basically just information on any bill of lading or invoice. Below that, sections 6 through 10 is where most people have a lot of trouble with, and particularly fields 7 through 9. These are very, very difficult to complete. So what I've done, we've gone ahead and developed an interface to complete those fields because they are based on logic, and I'll show you that right now. This here is an interface called Auto NAFTA, and while it doesn't necessarily guarantee that once you've completed the NAFTA it will be accurate, what it will do is prevent you from committing the most common errors that people make when they fill out an NAFTA, or prevent you from filling out the NAFTA in the case that you do not need to, which is often the case. So here's the very first question. Are you the exporter? If you're the buyer of the goods, you cannot fill out the NAFTA certificate. You need your customer to complete it for you. I'm sorry, your seller to complete it for you. So you're going to want to say yes to this question. If you are the seller, if someone's asking you to fill it out. And below here is the information that you would enter about the purchase of the goods. So you're the seller. Let's just say we're Seller Inc. New York. This would be the tax ID if you're a seller based in the States, or your GST number if you're a company based in Canada. I'm not quite sure what a Mexican firm would provide here, but let's just make one up, 12-57688. Your address would be 111 Manhattan Drive. We're going to use the example of a New York company selling to a Canadian company because that's mostly what I end up completing or helping people complete. And here's where things start to branch out and get a bit more difficult. How many items are you shipping? Now, technically, if you're shipping more than one item, you're going to have to fill out the preference criterions for more than one item, depending on how they're classified, if they're really distinct. If they're just a different color, it doesn't matter. You don't need to. If they have a different stock keeping unit, as long as it's the same product, you just need to say one here. It doesn't matter how many. So let's just say one. Are you also the manufacturer? So anyone that, it's not necessarily the seller that can fill it out. Anyone in the trade chain other than the buyer can complete the NAFTA, as long as they have the correct information required in order to complete it. So let's say yes, we are the manufacturer, and who bought the products from you. This will, you can just say various here. There's really no reason why you wouldn't. You can provide the information to customs on request. You don't need to provide the direct address for your customer, although you can by selecting the other two options. And here's the description of the item. Hopefully you know what that is. Let's say a wood table. And actually I wanted to show you another feature of the Auto NAFTA here, because we've put in some logic to prevent the stricter items. NAFTA is a conditional trade agreement. Not all items are treated the same way, so it's not exactly free trade. A good example is clothes. So if we put in an HS code for garments, we're going to get a message here, TPL alert. So clothes and other items such as electronics, customs knows that. Most people know that a lot of the inputs in those items are not typically made in North America. They're typically made in overseas in other countries where the manufacturing is a bit less costly. So I would look out for that. It doesn't mean that the items that you're manufacturing do not meet the NAFTA conditions, but it's definitely something you want to take a closer look at, and not something this interface is going to help you with. So let's say wood table, because that's something that is still quite frequently manufactured in North America. It's too heavy to ship from overseas, so it's unlikely you're going to get a lot of questions from customs about it. The HS code field, if you don't know what that is, we've provided a link here with a basic search function to find what your HS code is. But there's quite a few resources online that will help you figure out what that is. But it is very important because it determines how strict the NAFTA conditions are going to apply to your item are. Every HS code technically has a different condition and required to meet under the NAFTA. And the reason for that is when they drew up this agreement back in the 80s, a lot of industries, such as clothing, really lobbied the US and Canadian and Mexican governments to be very strict about how much foreign inputs could be used in the manufacture of those items. So that's the reason why the HS code and the classification of the item becomes quite important. Down here, where was the item made? So occasionally I see NAFTAs with China as a country. It really only qualifies to goods from the US, Canada, and Mexico. It has to be made in one of those countries. Technically, parts of it could be made in all three. But as long as it's made in any of these countries, you can go ahead and complete it. So we're going to go with USA. And again, here is where most people, if you're filling out the PDF of the NAFTA form, are going to get stuck because how the goods are manufactured are going to change the responses here. It's not just enough to say, yes, these goods were made in the States. You have to provide a little bit more verification about that. How do you know, in fact, that they were made in the States if you were not the manufacturer, etc.? Does this contain any parts from another country? And almost always the answer is going to be yes. I know we've built a wood table, we've made it by hand, but some of the screws that we put into that wood table likely were made overseas. So we're going to say yes. Where do your imported parts come from? Again, this is kind of a difficult question to answer if you're just like an artisan who made a wood table, but chances are it's probably safer just to say outside North America. Again, we're thinking about the screws and the smaller fixtures that have gone into our wood table. If you do say inside North America and you say no to this, chances are you're going to get a lot more scrutiny from customs because they know that it's very unlikely that a higher processed item is going to be made completely in one trade zone. And here we get the RVC calculator. So just because some inputs that are used in the manufacture of your item come from overseas, that doesn't disqualify it. It's actually a calculation that is used to determine whether the goods will qualify or not. So as long as 60% of the item was made in one of the NAFTA countries, the item is still going to qualify. So we're selling our wood table for $400 US. We may be paid $20 for the fixtures that we put into it. The rest of the wood came from the United States. So you see our final RVC percentage is 95%. That's well above the 60% limit. And we get a message saying, yeah, your item qualifies. So we're allowed to continue. In the case that, an example that's often cited, say you've imported a machine from China and you've made some customization to it. You've just stuck an American flag on it. And you paid $390 for it to import it from overseas. That's not going to qualify. So you're not going to be allowed to finish the NAFTA. You're going to have to tell your customer, I'm sorry, these goods do not qualify for NAFTA. I mean, you can tell them it was still made in the States. That's really a question of personal preference, but that's what the point of this calculator is for. And here you see the results for the fields 6 through 9 on the NAFTA form. You don't need to do anything here. Just leave them as they are, your criteria on your net cost, and whether or not you were the producer. Those are the correct answers to those questions based on what we've inputted so far. And here is our authorization. Again, we're only shipping one item, so we just need to authorize it and provide our information to the foreign customs agents about who we are, who we're saying that this information is valid. And it can be valid up to a year. So let's just say that. Fax I don't think is required. Here's a digital signature. You can also print it and re-sign it yourself if you like. And then we'll just punch in our email. And you can also forward the NAFTA. Usually if you're filling it out, someone's requesting from you, so you can just email it to them right away. Otherwise, just click Send NAFTA, and you will receive a copy of the NAFTA. And so here we have our completed NAFTA. And you'll see the difficult fields have been completed for us. All our information is on there. This NAFTA is now valid to be provided to your customer, your customer's customs broker, whoever is asking for it. And because we put various here, any other time we sell a wood table to Canada or the US, we're allowed to provide just this form. We don't need to keep completing it. But again, it's only valid for a year. So if anything changes, For example, if we start outsourcing the manufacturing of our wood tables to overseas, we're not going to be able to use this form anymore, which is why can only be valid for up to a year. Things can change quite quickly.